A 10-year-old boy with a prosthetic leg limped into a busy coffee shop, rejected by every table he approached. When he finally stopped in front of a tattooed biker covered in scars, his voice barely broke through the noise. "Can I sit here?" Everyone else said, "No." What he discovered in the next 60 seconds would expose an evil so twisted it would shake an entire neighborhood to its core. This is Jake and Connor's story, and it doesn't end the way you think. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're watching from in the comments. Enjoy the story. The morning grind sat on the corner of Elm and Fifth like it had for 20 years. Exposed brick walls, mismatched furniture, and coffee that actually tasted like someone cared. It was the kind of place where regulars knew the baristas by name, where Sunday mornings meant crowded tables and the comfortable hum of weekend conversation. But on this particular Sunday, that comfortable hum stopped. The door chimed and a 10-year-old boy stepped inside. He moved carefully, limping with each step, his left leg replaced by a poorly fitted prosthetic that clearly caused him pain with every movement. His clothes hung loose on a frame that was too thin, and his eyes darted around the shop like a small animal searching for shelter. He wasn't looking for the bathroom. He wasn't looking for his parents. He was looking for a table. Any table. Any stranger who might show kindness. The first table he approached held a young couple on a date, lattes and pastries between them. Before Jake could speak, the woman shook her head and turned her body away. Not welcome. Not here. His shoulders sagged. But he moved on. The second table held three businessmen reviewing documents. They saw him coming and suddenly became intensely focused on their papers, pretending he didn't exist. The third table held a mother with two children. When Jake reached them, the woman pulled her kids closer and said loudly enough for others to hear, "Where are his parents?" Not, "Are you okay?" Just judgment. The boy's face flushed red. His good leg trembled, but he kept moving. In the back corner sat a man most people avoided. His name was Connor, 41 years old, 6'3", with arms covered in tattoos that told stories he'd never speak out loud. A scar cut through his left eyebrow, another along his jaw. His leather vest bore patches that made people cross the street. Hell's Angels earned through loyalty, blood, and years on the road. He was drinking black coffee and reading a book, minding his business, existing in his corner without bothering anyone. Then he heard footsteps stop in front of his table. Jake stood there, so close Connor could see dirt smudged on his cheek, the way his chest rose and fell with exhaustion. His voice came out barely above a whisper. "Please, can I sit here?" Everyone else said no. Connor didn't hesitate. He pushed the chair across from him, out with his boot. "Yeah, kid, sit." Relief washed over his face. He moved toward the chair, his prosthetic leg dragging slightly with each step, but his legs wobbled and he stumbled. Connor caught him before he fell, steadying him with hands that were gentle despite their scars. As he settled into the seat, his sleeve shifted. That's when Connor saw them. Yellow bruises spreading across his forearm. Purple marks circling his upper arm in a pattern Connor recognized. Fingerprints. Adult-sized fingerprints that had gripped hard enough to leave their mark. His jaw tightened. He'd spent 15 years on the streets, 15 years in a world where he'd learned to read situations most people missed. When a child shows up alone, bruised and asking strangers for help, something is very wrong. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Jake," he whispered. "You hungry, Jake?" He nodded, eyes wide like he didn't believe someone was actually asking. Connor ordered him a sandwich, chips, and hot chocolate. When the food arrived, Jake stared at it like it might disappear. "Go ahead," Connor said quietly. "It's yours." He ate like someone who hadn't seen food in days, not messy and enthusiastic like kids usually eat. He ate like every bite might be his last. His hands trembled as he lifted the sandwich, his eyes darting up every few seconds to make sure Connor was still there. Finally, between bites, he spoke. His voice was stronger this time, though still quiet. "I'm not supposed to be here." Connor set his coffee down. "Where are you supposed to be?" "Home." The word came out flat, empty. "But I couldn't stay there anymore." "Why not?" His hands started shaking. The sandwich fell onto the plate. His breathing quickened, his eyes filled with tears he'd been holding back for too long. Then the dam broke. Tears poured down his face, silent at first, streaming over those bruises. Then came the sobs, heaving and desperate. "He hurts me," Jake choked out. "My uncle. After my parents died in the accident, after I came to live with him, everything changed." Connor's blood went cold. "How'd you lose your leg, Jake?" He looked down, shame flooding his face. "He said it was an accident. We were in the garage and he was backing out his truck, but he knew I was there. He saw me and he didn't stop." The words hung in the air like poison. An accident. That's what he told people. Except it wasn't. Not when you see someone and keep going. "But the worst part," Jake continued, his voice breaking, "I heard him on the phone last week. He told someone, if something happens to the kid, I get everything. The house, the insurance, all of it." Connor sat perfectly still, but inside him, something primal was waking up. This wasn't just abuse. This was premeditated murder, slow and calculated, hidden behind the guise of a grieving uncle taking in his orphaned nephew. An accident that took Jake's leg, and now a plan to take his life. "Jake," Connor's voice dropped lower, steady but firm. "I need you to tell me everything. I'm not going anywhere." It was a promise. When Connor said it, Jake seemed to understand. He meant every word. "He locks the pantry," Jake whispered. "Says I don't deserve to eat if I can't do my chores. But I'm 10. I can't do everything he wants. He got the insurance money from my parents, $500,000. But he said it's all gone, that I'm too expensive. But I see the new truck, the new TV. He's not broke." Connor's fist clenched under the table. He knew exactly what was happening. This man saw his nephew not as a person, but as a burden. And worse, as someone who stood between him and complete control of that inheritance. Connor stood up slowly. Jake's eyes went wide with panic. That look of another adult walking away. "You're not leaving me, are you?" His voice cracked. Connor knelt down until he was at eye level. "I'm not leaving you, ever, but I'm going to make sure that man never hurts you again. Trust me." He stepped outside and pulled out his phone. He dialed a number he'd called 1,000 times. "Wyatt, it's Connor." The voice on the other end was gravel and whiskey. "What's up, brother?" "Child abuse. Possible murder plot. I need every brother within 20 miles of the morning grind. Now." There was a pause. "What's going on?" "A kid who needs protection, and we're not waiting for the system to fail him." "Say no more. We're coming." Within 20 minutes, motorcycles began arriving. Hell's Angels from 3 counties. Men who'd gotten the call and dropped everything because a brother needed them. They rolled in like a storm. Leather jackets bearing the same insignia Connor wore. Chrome gleaming in the sunlight. Engines thundering with power and purpose. Wyatt walked straight to Connor. He was older, maybe 55, with a gray beard and eyes that had seen everything twice. "Fill me in." Connor told him everything. The bruises, the starvation, the accident that took his leg, the insurance money, the overheard phone call. By the time he finished, Wyatt's expression had gone cold. "Where's the boy?" "Inside, at my table." "And the uncle?" "Still at home, as far as I know." Wyatt nodded, then turned to the assembled brothers. "We do this right. We gather evidence. We make sure it sticks." What happened next wasn't chaos. It was precision. 2 members went door to door in Jake's neighborhood. They asked questions in calm, measured tones. Turned out people had noticed. They'd noticed a lot. One neighbor said she'd wondered why she hadn't seen the boy playing outside in months. Another admitted he'd heard yelling, screaming actually, but hadn't called anyone because he didn't want to cause trouble. One woman said she'd called Child Protective Services twice. Twice. Both times nothing happened. Inside the coffee shop, 3 others sat with Jake, asking careful questions. They wrote down every detail, dates, times, what his uncle said and did, everything. Another member, a former cop named Patterson, made calls. He got someone from CPS on the line. Not a receptionist, but an actual investigator. He laid out the facts in the clipped language of law enforcement, making it clear this wasn't a request. This was a notification that if they didn't act immediately, there would be consequences. The investigator promised to be there within the hour. Connor sat with Jake the entire time, holding his hand. His brothers worked around them with quiet efficiency, each one knowing their role without needing to be told. This was what the club did best, protect their own. And Jake was theirs now. One of the brothers, a man called Reeves who'd worked construction with Connor for years, sat down across from them. He had a daughter about Jake's age, and his eyes were wet as he looked at the boy. "My kid's got the same shoes," Reeves said quietly, nodding at Jake's worn sneakers. "Size 4, right? I got a bunch she outgrew. Good ones. I'll bring them by." Jake looked up, confused. "You don't have to." "Yeah, I do," Reeves said firmly. "That's what family does." Another brother, Bear, who ran an auto body shop on the east side, leaned against the booth. He was massive, 6'5", and built like his name suggested, with hands that could crush a man's skull, but were currently holding a notepad with surprising gentleness. "Listen, Connor," Bear said, "when this is over, when the kid needs stuff, doctor appointments, therapy, whatever, you let me know. My shop's flexible. We take care of our own, and that means you don't do this alone." Connor nodded, his throat too tight to speak. He'd ridden with these men for 15 years. He'd seen them in bar fights and funerals, at weddings and in jail cells. But this was different. This was them at their best. When someone helpless needed help, they showed up. No questions asked. The barista, a young woman named Emma, who'd been working at the morning grind for 3 years, brought over fresh, hot chocolate without being asked. She set it down in front of Jake with a gentle smile. "On the house, sweetheart," she said. Then looking at Connor, she added, "What you're doing, thank you. My brother went through something similar when we were kids. Nobody helped. So thank you." When Jake finally fell asleep in the booth, exhausted from crying and telling his story, Connor stayed. He stayed through the afternoon and into the evening. He carefully moved the boy so his head rested against his shoulder, and he didn't move, even when his arm went numb, even when his back started aching from the awkward position. When the police arrived at the uncle's house that evening, he was in the garage working on his new truck, the truck he'd bought with money that should have been used for his nephew's care, the same truck that had accidentally run over Jake's leg. He didn't see it coming. The officers read him his rights right there in the driveway. His expression went from confusion to indignation to fear. He started to protest, to explain, to deploy that concerned guardian voice that had worked before. But the officers weren't listening. They cuffed his hands and walked him to the cruiser while neighbors watched. The police searched the house. They found Jake's room. Barely a room, more like a storage closet with a mattress on the floor. On the outside of the door was a lock, the kind you use to keep people in. The room smelled of mildew and despair. A single light bulb hung from the ceiling, controlled by a switch on the outside. The walls were bare except for water stains. In one corner sat a cardboard box containing 3 shirts, 2 pairs of pants, and underwear with holes in them. That was everything Jake owned in the world. One of the officers, a veteran with 20 years on the force, had to step outside. He'd seen crime scenes that would make most people vomit. But something about this room, this deliberate cruelty inflicted on a child, made his hands shake with rage. In the kitchen, they found the pantry padlocked shut. But what made it worse was what they found next to the refrigerator. A detailed chart written in the uncle's handwriting, tracking exactly what Jake had eaten and when. Portions measured down to the ounce. Meals skipped as punishment. Days marked where the boy had been given nothing but water. This was systematic starvation, documented, calculated. The uncle had been keeping records of his nephew's suffering like a scientist running an experiment. In the living room, they found photographs, framed pictures of the uncle with Jake's parents, smiling at a barbecue that must have been taken years ago. The uncle had kept them displayed, maintaining the fiction that he was the grieving brother-in-law, the devoted uncle stepping up when tragedy struck. Meanwhile, just down the hall, he was slowly murdering his brother's son. In the uncle's office, they found the insurance documents. The policy on Jake's parents had paid out $500,000. Bank statements showed most of it was still there, carefully hidden in accounts the uncle had set up in his own name. There were spreadsheets, too, detailing his debts before the accident and his plans for the money after Jake was gone. They found more documents, too, papers showing the uncle had been in debt before the accident, behind on mortgage payments, credit cards maxed out, papers showing he'd been about to lose everything. And then his brother and sister-in-law had died, and suddenly he was the guardian of their only child and the beneficiary of their estate. But the most damning evidence was hidden in a locked drawer in his desk. The police had to break it open, and inside they found a journal. Page after page of entries dating back to just after the accident that took Jake's leg. The entries were chilling in their detachment. The uncle wrote about Jake like he was a problem to be solved, an obstacle to be removed. He detailed his plans. Reduce food intake gradually, make it look like the boy was just a picky eater. Ensure the prosthetic was uncomfortable enough that Jake would avoid activity, leading to further health complications. Document behavioral problems to establish a pattern that would explain any injuries. And on the last page, dated just 3 days before Jake ran away, was the most horrifying entry of all. Kids getting too weak to last much longer. Another month, maybe 2. Then I'm free and clear. Nobody suspects a thing. This wasn't just abuse. This was murder by neglect, planned and executed with cold precision, hidden behind the performance of a struggling guardian doing his best. Jake was taken to Children's Medical Center that evening. The paramedics were gentle, spoke to him and saw voices. Connor rode with him, his hand never leaving Jake's. At the hospital, doctors examined him. A pediatrician documented every bruise. An orthopedic surgeon examined his prosthetic, 2 sizes too small, causing infected sores. The amputation itself had been butchered, the follow-up care non-existent. "We're going to fix this," Dr. Mitchell said gently. "Get you fitted properly. You'll be able to run again." Jake's eyes went wide. "Really? Really?" Connor stayed through the night. When nurses tried to convince him to go home, he shook his head. "I told him I wasn't leaving. I keep my promises." Around 3 a.m., Jake woke up screaming. Nightmares. Connor was instantly at his side. "You're safe. He can't get you here." "I dreamed he found me. The truck." Connor pulled his chair closer. "That's not going to happen. There are 30 men outside this hospital right now keeping watch. And when you leave here, you're coming home with me." "You really want me?" Jake asked, his voice breaking. "Even though I'm broken?" Connor leaned forward until he was eye level with Jake. "You're not broken. You're brave. You survived something that would have destroyed most adults. And yeah, kid, I really want you. I'd be lucky to be your family." Jake cried then, but it was the kind of crying that comes with healing. 3 weeks later, Judge Patricia Chen looked at Jake in the courtroom. "What happened to you was not your fault. Now it's time to decide where you go from here. Is there someone you feel safe with?" Jake's hand wrapped around Connor's. He looked up at him first, then turned to the judge. His voice was clear and certain. "Him. He saved me." Judge Chen smiled. "Mr. Bennett, do you understand what you're taking on? This isn't temporary. This is forever." Connor looked down at Jake. "I know, ma'am. And I want that." "Then that's exactly what's going to happen." 6 months later, the brothers threw Jake a birthday party at Connor's house. Balloons, streamers, a 3-layer cake with blue frosting, presents piled high. Everyone was there. The whole chapter. Their families, children running and laughing. When they sang happy birthday, Jake stood in front of that cake with a smile that wouldn't quit. Someone asked what he wished for. "I already got it," he said. When the brothers started their motorcycles in unison, 30 engines roaring together, Jake laughed from somewhere deep inside. Connor steadied him when he wobbled. Jake wrapped his arms around Connor's neck and held tight. He whispered so quietly Connor almost didn't hear it over the idling motorcycles. "I'm home." 2 words. That's all it took. 2 words that meant everything.